All right.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of, I don't really know what this is called, but we're just going to talk about nutrition and diet and fitness and all kinds of fun topics. I'm here with my co host today, Bart Kay, of some carnivore YouTube internet fame. He is the nutritional science watchdog, one of my favorite channels on YouTube. So definitely go check out his channel. So, hello, Bart.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for coming on. And today we're going to be talking about cheat days, whatever that means for
Right.
different people. So typically people think about a cheat day as I'm on a diet. So therefore, it's a food I would typically eat, not on my normal diet. So a lot of people use this terminology for that are trying to lose weight. But I think it's really, I would classify it as anything that you normally stay away from, but that you indulge in for whatever reason, whether that's a planned reason or whether that's you've given in to some urge for some reason you've just gave in. Either way, people might classify it as a cheat day. So what we're going to talk about is what's happening metabolically when you're on a low carb diet, either that's keto or carnivore or any type of low carb diet. What's happening metabolically while you're cheating or immediately after, and when I say cheating, I mean usually consuming a lot of carbohydrates and fat together for most meals, things like that, right? And then, are there any longer term effects? And when I mean longer term, I mean maybe not like a year down the line, but maybe a week later or something like that. Is there any kind of ramp down time from that cheat day? And then, lastly, how does that affect or not the concept of fat adaptation? So that's the kind of the agenda for today. So my question for you, Bart, is maybe we could start with the fat adaptation. Let's
Sure.
maybe we'll start
Yeah.
there, and then we'll go into the cheat day. So, what does
Yeah.
it really mean to be fat adapted from a metabolic sense?
Yeah. From the metabolic standpoint, often you do hear the term, oh, you'll be fine once you're fat adapted, or, oh, you just haven't given yourself enough time to be fat adapted, or that kind of thing. So it is a term that's thrown around a lot. And, probably many people don't really understand what that means, at least metabolically.
Hmm.
What it does mean is that you have had sufficient time to synthesize the enzymes that you need in order to catabolize the free fatty acids at a higher rate,
Okay.
basically. So it's enzyme based because basically all your metabolic reactions are all enzyme catalyzed to speak of,
Hmm.
and the ability to move a lot of substrate through a pathway and get a lot of product quickly is about having enough enzyme to do it. So an enzyme is a protein,
Mm.
and it is put together by the body in the way that all other proteins are. However, the transcription of proteins takes time.
Mm.
So it takes a human body X amount of time to get itself sorted for that. Now, obviously, there are other enzymes as well, other reactions downstream of there and parallel with there that also come into play when you change your chronic food intakes. So when I say the enzymes, I mean at multiple points in the whole metabolic pathway diagram.
Hmm.
So it's quite an undertaking of the body to build and maintain an army of enzymes to do a particular role.
Mm.
So, like any other expensive thing, like you think of the enzyme army, as I said, we'll think of an actual army.
Hmm.
If it's of no use, then obviously the detraining effect will be disbandment of that army because there's a cost involved in keeping those proteins in shape and keeping synthesizing them all the time. So, if you are eating a diet rich in um, fat and with moderate protein and very, very low carbohydrates,
Hmm.
that will cause your body to go, right, now is the time I need to be oxidizing fat. So, if I don't have a lot of enzymes, which I will not have if I have prior to that chronically been eating piles and piles of carbohydrates,
Hmm.
because those carbohydrates are always metabolized ahead of the fat
Hmm.
because they're toxic, plain and
Right.
simple. That's why we need
Right.
to get them out cleared first. And if we can't burn them all up then we turn them into fat, basically to detoxify them and to store that energy for later use.
Right.
So that's how that all comes together. And then your body goes, right, well, I've got no enzyme for fat because you've been feeding me carbs for years. So now you're going to have to wait a while for me to build this army up.
Right.
Really? So
okay.
Message one, keep your protein up in your diet when you switch across to keto.
All right, very good. That's a good
Yeah.
message. Okay. All right. All right. So the question going to the concept of cheating. So let's say someone let's go to a hypothetical situation where we could talk about what's happening metabolically. So let's say you've gone a few months and you've been very strict, low carbs, right? And I'm talking about what they would call keto low carb or carnivore low carb, which is generally very, very low carb, right?
25 to 50 grams a day sort of thing.
Yeah, or less for sure, or zero. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So even at that zero level, and you've been doing that for a few months and you're feeling good and you decide, you know what, it's my birthday. I want to have a nice weekend where I don't have to worry about it. I'm just going to kind of enjoy some food I used to eat. And you feel confident that it'll be no problem for you to go back because you do look at those foods as poison potentially because they are poisonous to your body, damaging. But you say, hey, the dose makes the poison, right? So a little bit, it's not going to kill me for a day or two. That's the kind of the mindset that I would think people might have on a cheat day or a weekend or something. Yeah. So when you do that, what is happening exactly metabolically? Because I would imagine if you're doing a low carb diet, you are probably producing ketones most of the time, and you have a kind of you've depleted a lot of your reserves when it comes to glycogen in your liver potentially, and you're probably in a low inflammatory state, especially if you're eating a well-formulated animal-based low carb diet. So. That's just an open-ended question for you. Maybe you could go anywhere you want to start when it comes to metabolically what's happening.
Okay, so when you have the cheat and you eat, let's say, a high refined carbohydrate, high fat, junk food type option, something like that. Right.
Yes.
Okay, so the first thing that's going to happen is that you are going to break down the carbohydrate portion of that meal very, very quickly, and it will very, very quickly dump glucose into your bloodstream. Mm-hmm. The ketones will be fairly well unaffected by that, such that they are in the blood at that time. They'll just continue to be there, and your body will use them or excrete them. That's what it is. But your need for ketones, a lot of people don't really understand. Actually, the primary role of ketones is not as an energy substrate for the brain at all. It's actually as a second messenger hormone-like system to let the different tissues of your body understand what the particular metabolic conditions are at the moment and how to therefore gear the metabolism. So that message then will obviously taper off and the ketogenesis will disappear over the next 6, 12, 18, depending on how badly you transgress. If we're talking about a one-time bolus of food, like a one meal situation, well, okay, maybe 6, 12, 18 hours, ketogenesis will be shut off by that. On top of that, you are going to get the insulin spike from hell. The reason for that is because while ever you haven't been eating carbs, your hitherto blunted carbohydrate sensitivity in terms of insulin release, because it was so chronic, has now recovered back towards baseline. So you're now quite insulin sensitive now. Your body will readily release insulin, is what I'm talking about at this point. And so you suddenly you've had no carbs, no refined carbs, or no carbs of any kind for, as you say, quite a while. And then you dump a bunch in and they all glucose to the bloodstream. So that is incredibly toxic to the human body. There are two things that can damage body tissues chemically, or two classes of things, really. One of those is molecular oxygen. That's why everyone goes on about oxidative damage of your tissues. The other one is glucose. Glycation is it like glycation is another damaging thing that is parallel, and the kind of effects that has to oxidize things. So your body needs to get your blood glucose level down because you've just gone through the roof with it based on where it's been. And so we get this massive insulin release, and then that will suck your blood sugar back down to normal fairly rapidly, probably half hour, 45 minutes, depending on the exact makeup of the meal. Fat slows it down. So if there's fat mixed in, that'll slow that process down. If it was candy floss on the stick, the whipped candy or something like that, you're in big trouble then. If it was, that could be a problem for you. You'll be bouncing off the walls. Anywho, half hour, 45 minutes, maybe longer, depending exactly what the meal was. Then your blood sugar reaches the point where it was before you ate that bolus of cheat food, but it doesn't stop there. Your blood sugar will continue to drop below that line because the insulin response was completely out of line over the top. So now it's going to drag your blood sugar down really low. So that's going to probably lead you to want to repeat the dose. And now we're talking 3-4 hours later, you're going to be hungry again and you're going to want more food.
More carbs specifically. Yeah.
Exactly. More carbs is what you'll be craving. What you need to do at that point is have a decent meal of something greasy, something fried, something, eggs and bacon. You don't want, you'll be craving carbs, and the last thing you'll want to do is eat bacon and eggs that you fried or whatever. But that's what you need to do, because if you have that carb bolus, you can see how this becomes a self-perpetuating problem.
Yeah.
So in some individuals, that one cheat meal can be the thing that actually ends your keto career, because that's it. You're off. You're gone now. You're back. You're back to the carb-loving lifestyle. That's how they get you.
Sure.
Hopefully, most people are a bit more robust than that, and we'll get back on the horse and we'll try again. So that's what happens metabolically. I think that covers the major things that go on. Obviously, there are sort of gear changes, hormonal changes, and things that go on, because now your body suddenly thinks, oh, it's okay now. He's feeding me lots of carbs, and so now I can forget about the silly nonsense of making these enzymes to metabolize the food I'm actually biologically designed to, and instead take this poison in that is going to slowly kill me, destroy my insulin sensitivity, and cause me to become inflamed. And that was really where we needed to go next, because that's the next ramification of that, even that single bolus of cheat food. And that is, if it has fat and protein in that bolus together, then those things will interfere with each other in terms of their absorption. And it's a thing I've spoken about a number of times, called the Randall cycle.
Yep.
Now, what happens is, basically, because fat is blocking the absorption of sugar, and sugar is blocking the absorption of fat, nobody's getting into the cells, and the cells are actually slowly starving because they're not getting any energy in. Even though there's all this energy floating around in your blood, you just can't get it out of your blood into your cells. As a result of that, the redox potential and the energy state of all the cells drops. What that means is that a number of pro-inflammatory cytokines, which are normally deactivated, they are normally benign, they float around in your blood and in your cells, and they, as long as they're in their normal state, there's nothing to write home about here, nothing to see. But as soon as an inorganic phosphate binds onto these pro-inflammatory cytokines that wakes them up, and they start causing what's called an acute systemic inflammation. So it starts that cascade of different chemical reactions that sets your body into inflammatory mode.
Okay.
Very, very bad thing. Inflammation, well, chronic inflammation, very bad. Acute inflammation, nature designed it, it has a purpose, it's a good thing, it does a role at the time of the insult.
Right.
If you cause yourself to become chronically inflamed by repeating that dose every day of your life for 40 years or whatever,
right.
Then you have chronic inflammation, you are always inflamed.
Right.
If you are inflamed, you are likely to be a sufferer, or much, much more likely to be a sufferer of heart problems, cerebrovascular problems, type 2 diabetes, many cancers, all the big killers.
Right.
I could go on all day. They are
Arthritis.
all, absolutely, arthritis, yes, they are all underpinned by chronic systemic inflammation. Chronic systemic inflammation is underpinned by the phosphorylation of pro-inflammatory cytokines, and that is underpinned by the mitochondria inside the cells being distressed in some way. Either, in this case, the Randall cycle means those mitochondria can't get any energy, and so they're upset. The energy value in the mitochondria drops. The ability to rephosphorylate drops, so therefore the concentration of inorganic phosphate in the mitochondria builds up. That leaches out into the cell. That binds to the cytokines. Bam, inflammation. So that's the best description of that process that I think I can give without getting too over the top, technically speak. So hopefully that was it's just yeah.
Well, is there a timeline for the inflammation part? Let's say you do that one bolus and you go nuts for a night or something, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, I'm gonna get back into it, and I'm gonna go back to my regular low carb way of eating. And so we know there's a kind of a timeline when it comes to getting back into ketosis or kind of clearing out the glucose in your bloodstream and things like that. But is there a timeline for the inflammation? And maybe it's different for everybody, but is there a kind of general kind of idea of how long that might last?
You knew I was going to say it's different for everybody, didn't you?
Yes.
You just knew it. Yeah, I like individual differences. How long's a piece of string? Different situations that people are in. How long were they in ketosis before they came out? All sorts of things.
Sure.
But just on a rule of thumb, a single bolus of cheap food will cause quite a large acute inflammation for at least 24 hours, possibly 48, 72 at the absolute outside, depending on how badly you react.
Sure.
So, but obviously if you're repeating before those 72 hours are up, nominally, that's just a guesstimation, by the way, then you'll be going backwards in terms of chronic inflammation if you're repeating in that phase. But what I'm saying is basically over 2 or 3 days, that'll resolve itself. Right. People might be interested to know that you actually have a somewhat inflammatory immune response to any meal of any food of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
It's much less magnitude than the one we're talking about where your whole system's locked out for energy due to Randall cycle problems. So the problem we're talking about with this inflammation is a massive systemic inflammation that will fade over 3 days. Yeah?
Yeah. So
cool.
quick question about that. This is a side note, but I've noticed that sometimes if I do a fast, or not really a fast, but let's say I'm doing 1 meal a day, and in my one meal, I'll eat something going to be really clean. And then all of a sudden, it depends on what I eat, but I might get some kind of sinus reaction. It might be either a little bit of a runny nose or a quick stuffy nose or something. And I'm wondering, is that some kind of acute inflammation going on, or my body's addressing that? I don't know.
that will be an acute inflammatory immune cascade type response.
Mm-hmm.
When obviously you put something in your mouth and you taste it, what a lot of people don't understand is that most of that sense of taste is actually the smell of the food. It's not the actual taste of the food. Your tongue can actually only taste 5 basic things.
Right.
Everything, all the complexity beyond that and the different tastes of foods is all actually smell. So the aroma of the food is going through your nasal passage and into your sinuses and things.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
they'll be in there and they'll go, oh, hang on, I need to quickly react to this because this could be an invading pathogen. So it'll quickly go, right, everybody at the ready, produce some snot, good, bit of inflammation, right, good to go. Okay, oh, it's okay, it's just food, so we can relax now. And so then it abates. And unless it really is a pathogen or really is a problem, and then you're going to get sick.
Sure.
Because then it's going to go, right, now we're on. So it's like, okay, again, using the analogy of the soldiers, this time thinking about immune cells of soldiers, that it's like a call to action. Let's get ready. Let's start some wheels rolling. Nothing too much, but let's be ready. So every time you put food in your body, it's going to do that.
That makes sense.
To some degree. And a lot of people don't know anything about that. And they kind of like, they think about it and they go, oh, they say what you said. They say, oh, that makes sense. But it's not something you think about.
Sure. Because you think I'm not eating anything bad. It could be anything. Like I've had chicken or I've had bone broth or something like that. And it's just like, boom, all of a sudden something's good. It's not common, but once in a while I've noticed it, something like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. So going back to the cheat day thing, let's say, let me go back. Is there a theoretical amount of cheating or a carbohydrate consumption which could potentially damage your ability to be fat adapted temporarily? Like what I mean is that the whole number of enzymes we talked about.
Yeah. Okay. So when the army of enzymes is no longer needed, it will be disbanded by means of breaking that protein back down into amino acids and using those, recycling those insofar as that's possible and excreting any waste of any that are, of no further use, sort of thing. That process you might expect to dissolve away the enzymes over I really would be guessing at 3 to 5 days. I couldn't even think of having read any literature that would give me any clear indication on that.
Okay.
I'm only basing that on ideas about how long it takes to break down other things that I do know that there's a little bit of research on. So assuming that it's a ballpark 1-for-1 thing, let's say 5 days to a week of eating a carb-based diet might leave you back where you were with very, very few fat-burning enzymes or fat-oxidizing enzymes, really.
Sure, that makes sense. So how about the last question I have is, and this is your opinion, psychologically, for people that have food addictions and particularly around carbohydrates and processed food and things like that. So let's say that someone, whether it's planned or unplanned, but let's go with the unplanned first. I think psychologically it's a little different when it's unplanned, for sure. Meaning like it's a different than, hey, my birthday, for example, my birthday's March 2nd, right? If I say, hey, March 2nd, I'm going to have a meal and a piece of cake or something, right? And then I'm not going to feel too guilty about that because I'm like, okay, I planned this. It's no big deal, right? Yeah. But if all of a sudden tonight I go out to McDonald's and just start binging and I wasn't planning on that, that's a little different, I think, psychologically, right? For most people. Absolutely. So because of that, maybe we can start with, let's start with the planned example, right? Do you think it's a good idea to go right into like, hey, I planned a day and my birthday and I cheated a bunch, but you know what? I go on a 3-day fast or a multi-day fast and just kind of try to undo what I just did. Do you think that's a good approach? Or I've heard people say, no, you shouldn't do that because that can cause eating disorders. So therefore you should just go back to the way you normally eat and, live to fight another day. What are your thoughts on that?
I think either could be valid for different people depending on their particular personality. I I think there are people that would think both ways and would prefer to work both ways. Clear example. I mean, when you were talking just now, I was thinking, oh, Troy's been listening to Pim again. About, because she's always about, okay, if you're going to cheat, that's fine. It needs to be planned, and you don't just do it off the cuff, and that's her way of thinking about it. And I'm more like, well, I almost never want to do it actually these days. So when it does come up, maybe I should.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. I think it's individual differences probably for my money on that one as to how people are going to act or react.
My take on it is, if you have food addictions, right, then and you have food addictions and then you give in to something and it was unplanned. I think going on the pattern of doing that and then fasting and then giving in again unplanned can definitely create some kind of eating disorder. So I think if you've given in and it wasn't planned and you psychologically are impacted by that, then I would say probably don't go on a fast. I mean, maybe if you do intermittent fasting or whatever, but you could just go back to your regular routine and you'll feel better, probably the next day or two, right?
Yeah.
I think, though, if you've planned it out and you said, hey, on my birthday, I'm going to eat this, and then after that, I'm going to do a 2 to 3 day fast. And so therefore, it's psychologically, you've already planned it. It's no big deal. That's kind of where I'm at mentally right now. It depends on the context of what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think it's really, really important to understand that when you do have a cheat day, whether it's planned or unplanned, the main thing for me, is to say, right, well, let's get straight back on the program. The program's fine. There's nothing wrong with the program. Mm-hmm. And if you therefore then turn around and say, oh, I'm no good at this, I can't do this, I'm too weak, I'm, whatever.
Right.
That's not a good outcome. So you need to get straight back on that horse for me.
Mm-hmm.
And if that means you need to get back onto strict ketogenic diet, fine. If that means you're a carnivore, go back to that, fine. If that means you really feel like you need to pay penance by way of fasting, which to me would depend on how serious the reaction is to the cheat meal, right. then so be that.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. That's good. Any last words, Bart, about this topic?
I don't know. I think we've covered a lot of territory in just under half hour, so that's pretty good actually. Pretty good stuff. Awesome. So I mentioned Pim, so let's just give her a quick shout out. It'll be really good for folks to go and support her channel as well. And poor old me, please support my channel because YouTube is frantically unsubbing people from my channel as fast as people are subbing to it. Okay. At the moment again, I seem to have been rebanned in terms of growing, but there you go. Those are the prices you pay for having, opinions about things that are not in line with those of the set agenda.
I agree. And so go sub to Bart's channel, go sub to Pim's channel. I'll put them in the link in the description for my video. And I also have a video which is a summary of what I learned from Bart actually about the Randall cycle. It's called "Eating a Mixed Diet is the Worst Thing You Can Do." Awesome. So I'll put that in the description. So that goes into just a little summary, like a 5-minute summary of the Randall cycle. So. Awesome. So check out all that. And again, thank you, Bart, for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
See you later.